Okay, I'm going to have to make this real quick. I'm supposed to be going to a farmer's market today. Selling my wares, my woodpecker peanut butter feeders, which feed more than woodpeckers. I've had during, I think it's mostly, not during really mating season, but while the birds are raising their young, I've seen them feed their young this peanut butter. It might be good for them because it's soft. Even though it has nuts in there, there is softness to it. The ones I've seen feeding their young, sparrows, cardinals. I think the starlings might. Now the starlings, once the little starlings leave the nest, as far as I can tell, they just go off. They're on their own. They don't need the parents anymore. But when they're they're in the nest. Whereas the sparrows and the cardinals, they'll still, I know for a fact that they'll still feed their young even though they're out of the nest. I've seen it actually happen where the young will be over there yipping yapping and up in the tree, and the sparrow will grab a piece of peanut butter, a little chunk of peanut butter, and go back into that tree and feed the young. Same with the cardinals. And I think some birds might use that during mating season to procure a mate. You know, the males will feed the females the peanut butter. I've seen them do it at least with the sunflower seeds. I've seen the finches do that, for mating. But anyways, so here's the gig. One of my rants again. I answered a question on Reddit, which I thought was a decent question. It says, not really great, because I mean, who hasn't thought this question before, but it said something to the effect of, what is one of the craziest things from history that isn't being taught? Something to the effect of, it's either being suppressed or it's kind of being ignored. And I said, the oppression of women. And I gave some examples of the crazy stuff that, not just in India. I mean, I try to be mostly United States because that's where I live in the United States. But I tried to be inclusive worldwide, realizing, to let people know, I realize there's a world outside the United States, which a lot of United Statesians, forget, hey, you know what, this might not be applicable elsewhere. But anyway, so the MRAs, of course, come out in force. And me being the feminazi I am, before I die, I would like to see more social equality. We have the laws on our side, except the RA. We don't have that yet. But the social laws, I want them in the religious laws. I want to see more equality there. And so anyways, I gave some examples of the absolutely ludicrous. We would think this stuff, I mean, and most of this stuff people have not been taught. Why? Because the textbooks are written by wealthy, conservative, straight, heterosexual, Christian, rich, Southern males. They write the textbook. So the only thing you hear about the misogyny is, women's right to vote. And they won't even call it, people don't even refer to it as misogyny. Women not having been allowed to vote, they won't consider that misogyny. Which it was. That's the definition of it, And so, anyways, the MRAs come out in force. And anytime you try to say, historically, some person has not been equal, you'll probably get like one legit person and then one complete troll who will have 15 different accounts. So it'll make it look like the world doesn't agree with you. But, and the trolls are in this case, they're always male. When it comes to MRAs, they're always male. Well, trolls are typically male anyways. Anyway, so one person said, you know what? It wasn't that bad. One of the examples I gave was that men could rape their wives with impunity. And rape takes many forms. forcing a woman to have sex without a condom, stealthing, taking the condom off without her knowledge during the sex act, putting her into a position she did not want to be in. Let's say you went from vaginal sex to anal sex, and you forced her into that position. And even though she didn't scream or shout or whatever, she was afraid that it would turn into a physical fight. So she just acquiesced just to get out of there, without being murdered or being physically harmed, other than having to, do something it's going to be painful that she doesn't want to do. There's various things of rape, just coercion is a form of rape. Nagging for sex, form of rape. Men could beat their wives with impunity. Men could, I think one of the very first examples I gave was men could commit their wives for any number of reasons, including, having an affair, disagreeing with him in politics or religion, being quote unquote naggy, talking too much, talking too loud, wanting independence, being able to, reading, writing, not doing her quote unquote womanly duties of taking care of house, home, and hearth and child. Anything, yelling, not being clean enough, whatever. I mean, these were the examples I gave in my original response to the OP, and I got, it wasn't that bad, or you're making this up, or some of this isn't true, which all of it was true. All of it was exactly true. Just the fact, and one of the things I said, just the fact that women didn't have the right to vote is one crazy, crazy historical fact that really doesn't get talked about. The most that gets talked about is, women got the right to vote, 19th Amendment, 1920. Crazier was it took till 1920, till early 1900s to get women, for women to get the right to vote. Men pushed back on that. They did not want to cede power to women. They wanted that taxation without representation for women, not for themselves, for women. Men of color got the right to vote before women got the right to vote. Now, there's some debate as to when women of color got the right to vote. I'm kind of thinking that it might have just been applicably, because I read the amendment, the 19th Amendment, and it didn't say anything about race. It might have been in the application of voters' rights, because some places had literacy tests and poll taxes and all sorts of things, blacklistings and all that sorts of things. So that might have been why women of color did not get the right to vote until later. I think most people give like 1960s as roundabout date as to when black women got the right to vote. But if that's the case, then no black people got the right to vote to 1960s, because they did not indiscriminately, by gender, give these tests and these taxes and these blacklists. They didn't say because she's a black woman, we're going to do it, but this black man can vote. They didn't do it that way. So I don't know. I'm still researching that a little bit to find out the truth about that. I want to do a video about that. So I know, because I'm not clear, there's probably a lot of other people that aren't clear on that. But anyways, MRAs, and then I blocked what I allowed them to do. Okay. I let them respond to me, and I gave a full response to them, letting them know I'm going to block them because they're misogyny. I mean, it was total misogyny. And I was going to block them. And so I gave them a full response addressing all their points, unless some of the points were incredibly ridiculous and just were nonsense. So I couldn't deal with that, but legitimate. Well, none of them were really legitimate because, I mean, if the roles are reversed, and the roles do often get reversed, and they'll fly up and yell, that's not right, blah, 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 violation of amendments and Constitution and Bill of Rights, blah, blah. But then, saying, anyways, I'm going off on a tangent there. But anyways, I did tell them I was blocking them for their inanity, or sometimes just outright lying on their part. And then I'd block them. Then what they would do is they'd go in their other troll account and then rebut me again. And I'd be like, no, you're stalking. I know you're the same person. You're stalking. Don't do that. And some of these troll accounts I know was the OP. Because the OP addressed everybody else in his regular. I know it's a him because that's the only people that would troll, feminist comments. But anyway, so he responded to everybody else's comment in his original profile, but allegedly didn't respond to me at all. No, you responded in one of your troll accounts. So anyways, another person said, well, I do agree that most of the crap done to women is being suppressed historically. I do agree with that, and I do agree that it's because men write the history books. But you shouldn't call people who respond to you shouldn't jump on the misogyny train, the accusations, right off the bat. And I'm sitting here thinking, no. When you state that men were able to rape women with impunity, and somebody responds to you saying, well, being a woman back then wasn't that bad, that's a misogynist. When you say women did not have the right to vote, and they're still making an argument that it wasn't that bad, oh, well, you didn't get the right to vote, that's not that bad. We had an insurrection by people who truly believed that their vote did not count, or people who were dead were voting, or all sorts of nonsense. They started an insurrection over that. So don't sit there and tell me that not having the right to vote is not that bad. Don't tell me there's so many things that women did not have. They didn't have a right to have a bank account. They didn't have a right, if they earned money, it went to the male head of household. They didn't have the right to their own paycheck in their name. It went to their husband or their father or their eldest brother if he was the male head of household. They didn't have right to inheritance. They didn't have a right to file for divorce. If their husband divorced them, the husband got everything. She just got the clothes on her back. That was it. She didn't get custody of the children. And usually the husbands abandoned the children, but would sometimes come back later to get the daughters so they could rape them or have them do household duties, cooking, cleaning, whatever. And the boys they would sometimes come back to get when they were field size so they could work in the shop or work in the field or do whatever needed. They were able to make him money. But a lot of female babies, just like they're doing in India now, they used to kill them because they were a liability, not an asset. They could not bring money in. Remember, there used to be a dowry. If a woman got married, the father had to give the husband a dowry. And sometimes a husband would take that dowry and kill his wife, or treat her poorly, or rape her, or put her in an institution so he could keep the money and not have to deal with her. That happened so frequently. Okay, so none of this was good. Men held all the power. Women were property of men. They went from going to being property of their father to being property of their husband. And that's why they made women change their names. So you now were owned by somebody else. You had that somebody else's name. So they knew who you belonged to. Okay, and that's why we have the Ms. and Mrs. You are now property of that man. You become a Mrs. So everybody knows, every other man knows, hands off. Men can do whatever they want. They just got the Mr. But women, can't rape her because she's married or something. Or, can't sexually harass her because she's married. Something like that. But men can do whatever they want. So anyways, any one of this, if you bicker the point that women didn't have it that bad, then you're a misogynist. Because I pointed all this stuff out and more. There was a lot of horrific things. That menstrual huts. That was another thing I pointed out. Oh, wasn't that bad? Yeah, you're put out in the hut away from your ostracized, and then you're put out there to get raped or killed by a serial killer or serial rapist, which happened a lot. And menstrual huts still do appear, I think, in India, in rural India. I think they're still practicing menstrual huts, and that's what's happening to women. They're getting raped at night because there's no crowd or community of people to protect them, or they're killed by serial killers. Men know what them huts are for. All they have to do is open the door to see if somebody's in there, and they can do whatever they want to do. There's nobody there to protect her. And that used to happen here in the United States until probably about the mid-1850s, I think. It started drastically changing. But I think in the rural areas, just like India now, I think they were probably still practicing it until probably the early 1900s. Because I did hear of menstrual huts being a true story in the early 1900s. So anyways, also, I didn't dwell on this, but castration, female genitalia mutilation. That was practiced here in the United States up until the early 1900s when it started getting banned. They started making laws against it. Another person said, what did they say? Another person said, this isn't crazy stuff. They're talking about crazy stuff and you're just going on a rant. I said, yeah, it's a rant about crazy stuff. This is crazy stuff. This is crazy stuff. The crazy laws that we used to have here in the United States that is hidden from history. That's not talked about. That's suppressed. So we won't think about it because heaven forbid, we get an uprising of women who demanding more rights. Heaven forbid they demand equal pay. So anyways, I responded to that and I said, what isn't crazy about that? Men could rape their wives and not have any repercussions about it. That's crazy. Women didn't have the right to vote. That's crazy. Half the one gender of the population was forcibly institutionalized at the will of their spouse. That's crazy history! And yes, it's being suppressed. None of y'all trolls knew this. And I told them, none of y'all trolls knew any of this until I typed it out here now. So yes, it's being suppressed. I says the only thing I learned about misogyny in history was that women got the right to vote in 1920. Well, that's it. I didn't know all about this, how poorly women were treated. And so then anyway, somebody else said something about, it was only the wealthy white men who had the privilege. And I'm like, no. Poor men, yes. Poor men did not have... They said something about the monetary system. I says, the monetary system is relatively new. That's just several hundred years old. And some tribal communities don't even use the monetary system. And I says, so just saying, the rich white men had, all the powers, like, that's eliminating, like, the rest of the world that's not white. And it's also eliminating the rest of history before the monetary system, which was thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And so I said, and the wealthiest woman had it much worse than the poorest man because she had no laws protecting her. She was property of her husband. She was his chattel. Whereas the poor man could beat his wife. He could murder his wife with impunity. Which is true. They really didn't charge, all the man had to do was say, crime of passion. And he was let off the hook, and usually. it wasn't until like the 1800s when it started to change. But I think it was like the mid 1800s was when things started to change. And I think that was because the women's suffragette movement. 1920 was when it really, really started changing because women had the right to vote. So then the Congress people, the president, whatever, president-elect, they had to coddle us women. So then we started getting, all these, equal rights and, wage equality and, anyways. But yeah, so yeah, the monetary system played nothing. Yes, the wealthy white men had it better than poor white men, but poor white women had nothing ever. Wealthy white women had nothing ever. All the women were, poor white men could institutionalize their wives just like the wealthy white men. The poor white men could rape their wives just like the rich white men. It didn't matter. So anyways, that's my rant for the day. I hope you learned something. If you want me to, I rarely check in on this profile account. If you want me to go, I'll actually write down stuff so I have a coherent video for you to listen to. If you want me to go into detail about how bad women had it pre-1920, I'll tell you. And I also would like to say that the Native people, the First Nations people, the Native Americans, whatever you want to call them, they didn't have this. This misogyny was brought to this country by the white man when he brought this misogyny from Europe. Okay, but the Native people in the United States, the first people, they didn't do this to their women. They didn't have the menstrual huts and all that stuff. Menstruation was something to be celebrated. As a matter of fact, a lot of Native communities had celebrations when women had their first menstrual cycle. It was a celebration. And they weren't put out, and they weren't, it wasn't like this person had all the, the men had all the inheritance. That was not it. Even though the chiefs and stuff were all men, they didn't have the misogyny, not nearly to the extent that the white man brought to this country. And the Native peoples had to just succumb to that because genocide, and land theft and all that stuff. So that was forced on them. That was not something that they actively promoted or wanted to participate in. Anyway, so that's it. Goodbye.